As many of these ridiculous stories that I do day after day, sometimes some of them just catch me completely off guard. And this story right here is one of them. So in this picture, you see a man by the name of Mark Raite, and I'm guessing that's how you pronounce his last name. At this point, it doesn't even matter considering the level of intensity of the crime he committed. And he is an ex-Syracuse, New York firefighter who had 10,000 plus. Let me say that again. 10,000 plus child pornography files. And when they discovered he had all of that, he ended up avoiding to register as a sex offender, and he was able to keep and maintain his pension. A former Syracuse firefighter who was nearing the end of a 7-year prison sentence for 10,000 plus videos and images of child pornography avoided being added Friday to the state's public sex offender registry. So mind you, this guy was already in jail since 2013. And he's about to get out, and he doesn't have to register as a sex offender, and he's still able to keep his pension. Then why even send him to jail is the question I ask next. Mark Raite, age 57, was rated a level 1 sex offender, considered the least likely to reoffend after a prosecutor failed to convince a judge to make an exception in the case. The guy had 10,000 plus files of child pornography. What makes you think he wasn't going to reoffend? If they didn't catch him, who knows how many files he would have garnered by now. Remember that video I did about that guy who had the terabytes? That was crazy. Now that was crazy. Under law, Raite was deemed a level 1 sex offender based on a risk assessment tool with multiple factors. A judge would have had to find there were specific aggravating factors to override that rating. Raite will also still get a $48,486 a year pension, according to See Through New York, after retiring a week before his arrest on child porn charges in August 2013. That's why he's able to get it. If they had fired him before he was able to retire, he most likely wouldn't get it. That's what it was. He retired right before he got arrested. And that's what saved it. His retirement came 2 months after state police had raided his residence, seizing a computer with videos and images of child pornography. Raite's lawyer, Michael Spano, acknowledged Friday that his client had hoarded child porn, but he argued that a child porn collector should not be penalized, as though victims depicted in the photos and videos were the same as victims physically abused by the offender himself. Basically, in layman's terms, he should not get any type of huge punishment, because he did not actually physically touch or do physical sexual things with the kids. All he did was watch them. The excuses that is being made here for this individual is appalling. It's as appalling as the act itself. Prosecutor Jordan Aiello countered that a victim of child porn was re-victimized every time someone viewed that photo or video of the abuse, which I agree with. County Court Judge Stephen Doherty ruled that Raite would be penalized for the victims depicted in his child porn collection. Spano also argued that the sheer size of Raite's collection wasn't any reason to treat him differently from any other child porn collector. After all, someone else could easily have viewed 100 illegal images a day but not saved them as Raite did. So basically what he's saying is 10,000, that's nothing compared to, say, 11,000 or 12,000 or 30,000. 10,000 plus files is a lot of files. I don't care if it was 10 files. That's still too much of child pornography. This lawyer is already irking me. Already. But Aiello repeatedly pointed to the size of Raite's collection, as well as the fact that there were victims as young as 2 years old depicted, in arguing for a judge's override in the case. There were also hundreds of files including sadomasochistic abuse. Possessing and sharing images and videos of 2-year-olds was particularly intolerable. Not only that, but the risk assessment tool treated the offender the same, whether he had 3 or 10,000 victims. Obviously, the more victims, the more worse the crime. But Doherty noted that the number and age of Raite's victims had already been factored into his assessment. He agreed with Spano that he wasn't allowed to penalize Raite further for the same factors. The two sides also sparred over whether Raite had taken responsibility for what he had done. Raite confessed to the child porn at the time of his arrest. He later pled guilty and took what amounted to the maximum punishment, which was 7 years. He should have got 1 year for every file that they found, which was 10,000. But Aiello noted he had been booted from one sex offender treatment program in prison after calling himself a victim of the system, casting the crime as accidental, and describing himself as an upstanding citizen. This guy is like void of reality. He said that this was accidental. You do not accidentally access or download 10,000 plus files of child pornography to a drive of any kind and call it an accident. That's not the whole story, Spano countered. Raite had been progressing through one sex offender treatment program when it was disbanded. He was sent to a different prison in order to start all over again on a 6-month program, Spano said. While Raite may have not had the best attitude to start, he did come back and complete that program later. Raite also made use of his time in prison. He worked as a teaching assistant and started a yoga group that had more than 200 students. Doherty ruled that Raite's confession and eventual completion of treatment in prison were proof that he had taken responsibility. The initial risk assessment tool had scored Raite 30 risk assessment points for the young age of the victims. The judge added another 30 points after ruling that Raite should be penalized for multiple victims. That left a scoring of 60 points. It would have taken at least 70 points to score Raite a level 2 sex offender, placing him in the public registry. Doherty ruled that there were no other factors that warranted an override to the level 1 designation. Raite is due to be released from prison later this month. Raite joined the Syracuse Fire Department in 1987. He earned $81,827 with overtime in 2011, according to state records. This is absolutely ridiculous. This is about as bad as that story I did about the cop out in the Midwest somewhere who went into that house and was sniffing through them people's daughter's panties and did it twice and got caught on the nanny cam and pretty much got a slap on the wrist. This is another slap on the wrist. And based on this whole treatment thing that he got that they're talking about, I wonder what kind of prison was he even in? Because it sounded like he was in that. It doesn't sound like he was struggling at all, to be quite honest. Just by reading this article. But that is absolutely wild. So he did all of that. He doesn't have to register as a sex offender, and he's still able to keep his almost $50,000 a year pension after doing all of that. I guess sometimes it pays if you do have a good lawyer, because that lawyer, as much as I dislike him based on the stuff that I've read that came out of his mouth, he got himself a top-notch lawyer to get him off the way that he did, even though he only served 7 years. But 7 years, he should have got way more, in my opinion. You have black men behind bars right now for just a little bit of weed who serve longer than 10 years. You have black men behind bars who have been falsely accused of something and have spent decades behind bars only to get out of jail and to only hope they can possibly get some kind of compensation for the time lost, because they ain't getting the time back. But this guy gets 7 years in prison for having 10,000 plus files of child porn, and he's still able to keep his pension. Somebody out there, please help me make it make sense. Oh, that's right. You can't make any sense of this whatsoever. And he doesn't have to register as a sex offender. Y'all let me know what y'all think about this down in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. Follow me on Twitter if you haven't done so already. Have your notifications turned on, and I'll talk to you in the next one.